Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm Dipper Joseph Oka, your product marketing manager at MadCap Software. I'll be your webinar host for today, introducing our presenter and handling any logistics and the Q&A at the end of the webinar. I'll be keeping an eye on the Q&A panel, so if you do have any technical issues, I hope to be able to resolve them in the background, so just drop me a line in there. I'm very excited to be joined by Solena Lemoigne today. Solena is a content architect and founder of Elegance in Chaos, specialized in helping medical device manufacturers. The story goes that Solena asked her first question at 2 and hasn't stopped since. While working on content, she wore the caps of technical writer, terminologist, UI designer, trainer, technical lead, taxonomist, translation and localization coordinator, UX designer, collective intelligence facilitator, and content architect, to name a few. Having contributed to products from small R&D companies to massive companies, she can't remember being bored even one day. To her, information is the blood of the organization, and her contribution is to have it flow so projects come to bear fruit. She thrives in complex and uncertain environments, harnessing the power of norms and regulations, and ultimately revealing the elegance underneath the chaos. Just before I hand over to Selena, I'll just do a little bit of housekeeping. First of all, we are recording this session, so just in case you get cut off or you don't make it till the end, you'll receive a link to the recording in a couple of days. At the end of the webinar, we have a Q&A session, so feel free to type your questions into the question panel throughout the webinar, and Solena will be sure to answer them at the end. If we do run out of time before we answer all questions, we'll be sure to send answers to those questions by email soon after the webinar ends. Looking around the interface, if you look at your top right, you'll see links to downloadable resources and URLs to Elegance in Chaos and our suite of MadCap products, some of which you can start trying straight away. If you are interested in a CCMS and our new product, Xylene LCMS, you can always request a demo. So feel free to click and go on to register for those. Today's webinar takes us on a journey through the intricate landscape of medical device documentation. We're going to be embarking on an exploration by delving into the critical need for manufacturers to demonstrate their competence, the efficacy of their processes, and the reliability of their partners and providers. Whether you're new to the field or a seasoned expert, we'll demystify the categories of medical devices, outlining the journey from conception to clinical use, and discuss the importance of voluntary compliance with industry standards. So this webinar isn't just a presentation, it's an invitation for you to challenge the status quo, to question and refine your understanding, and to equip yourself with the knowledge and tools necessary for excellence in your medical device documentation. Take it away, Selena.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here today. What is the next step then? The next step is for me to start the presentation, right? Deepo, there are a couple of questions already in the Q&A about technicalities.
Okay, let me just take a look at that. Q&A, has it started? You can't hear anything. Frozen. That is, we have started and things are going on. Let me check on my side. You can go ahead, Selena, and I'll be sorting that out on the other side.
Okay, lovely, thank you. So hi, the name is Solena Lemoigne, and I'm the founder of the cabinet consultancy eleganceinchaos.com. I have had 25 years in the content field, working for the European community, for R&D in Xerox, for Thales on ciphering and electronic warfare, Irdeto working on data security, and Acteon Group working on medical devices. If you're curious and want to know what I post about, feel free to add me or follow me on LinkedIn. You have the QR code right displayed on your screen. So today, I'm going to be talking about two areas of expertise. On your left, this is medical devices. Technically, this is the Da Vinci robot. It allows surgeons to operate remotely. And on the right-hand side, this is an example from ICSIA CCMS dealing with structured content, also known as intelligent content. So what is our agenda today? I'm going to walk us through a short state of the medical device industry. Then we'll move on to what medical devices are, and also, for those who are not familiar with the field, what is structured content. I will do a reminder about the regulatory framework in which manufacturers operate, and why I am absolutely convinced that regulations and structured content work well together. So today's focus is going to be mostly on Europe and North America. The reason being, I have more experience with these two areas. The other reason being that requirements tend to still vary from one part of the world to another part of the world, and within a part of the world, requirements tend to vary between different countries. So there are specificities on the market of South America, Africa, Middle East, Asia, and Australia that just won't really be addressed here for the sake of time. So in North America, this is how the medical device industry pie is split. Nearly half of it is split between big players, and half of it is split in other players. Other players tend to be smaller scale companies compared to, say, Medtronic, who last year employed 95,000 people. In Europe brings together 35,000 medical technology companies. 92% of them are SMEs. And in that report, SME doesn't stand for small and medium enterprises. It stands for small and micro enterprises. So just between two big areas in the world, you already have two very distinct industrial landscape. North America with big players, and companies in Europe who are mostly smaller scale players. The challenge they face is that the regulatory requirements are very close to each other. It's an industry, it is business, even if health is business. And this gives you an idea of the revenue generated in North America. So in 2023, the cumulative revenue in North America was $188 billion US dollars, projected to reach $250 billion US dollars in 2028. The industry in Europe is 160 billion euro of the market, and it is the second largest market after the United States. This is just to give you an idea of what the industry is. Now, what are medical devices for those who are new to the field? Thankfully, as I said, the medical device industry is very heavily regulated, and for very, very good reasons. The regulations are extremely helpful when you're looking for definitions and terminology approaches. So this definition of medical device regulation, of medical device, is taken, from the Medical Device Regulation 2017-745, and it is the Article 2. It is a mouthful, so but I think it gains being read out loud, so bear with us. Medical device means any instrument, apparatus, appliance, software, implant, reagent, material, or other article intended by the manufacturer to be used alone or in combination for human beings for one or more of the following specific medical purposes. 1. Diagnosis, prevention, monitoring, prediction, prognosis, treatment, or alleviation of disease. 2. Diagnosis, monitoring, treatment, alleviation of or compensation for an injury or disability. 3. Investigation, replacement, or modification of the anatomy or of a physiological or pathological process or state. 4. Providing information by means of in vitro examination of specimens derived from the human body, including organ, blood, and tissue donations, and which does not achieve its principal intended action by pharmacological, immunological, or metabolic means in or on the human body, but which may be assisted in its function by such means. Told you, that was a mouthful. Every time a manufacturer has an idea for a device, this is the definition they're going to go back to and say, where does our medical device fit? To clarify the ideas, a medical device is something that treats, but is not a medicine, if that helps. Medical devices are classified based on the risk they present if they stop functioning. So Class 1 devices include corrective glasses, such as the ones I'm wearing now. Without those, I would still be able to operate. I wouldn't drive, obviously, because I'm too short-sighted, but I would still be able to move around my home and do things if I put them very, very, very close to my face. So these are Class 1. And then as the risk increases, so does the classification. You can go in medical devices from glasses to a pacemaker, something that's going to keep your heart or the heart of your loved ones beating when this muscle starts to fail. The classification is important. So are two other notions. The intended use, that's the purpose of the device, and the indications for use, which are the circumstances or conditions under which the device is used. Why is this important? Because in the certification process, which is rather long, as you can say, that's an example of a European certification process, there are many, many steps. And every time the manufacturer is due to explain why they make the choices they make. First and foremost, is this product a medical device or not? Is it an accessory? Is it something completely different? Is it a machine that is not a medical device? First question, is it a medical device? If the answer is yes, then what class applies to this medical device? And this class is determined based on the risk analysis. Once you have, it's a medical device, I know which class it is, I have identified its intended use, I have identified its indications for use, the manufacturer will look up the general safety and performance requirements that are applicable and answer to each and every one of them via the technical file. So the technical references are the elements that bring together the general safety and performance requirements that are applicable and the answers from the manufacturer. How it is going to be produced, where are the materials used in its productions going to be purchased, how does the manufacturer select its providers, what is the manufacturer's definition of quality, what is the manufacturer definition of an acceptable risk, what is the definition of a non-acceptable risk. All this input accompanies the medical device while it is being created and developed. Then comes the time for the first prototypes, and it's time to move on to clinical evaluation. How does the medical device fare to existing solution? If it's something that's an improvement, or is it something completely new? And then how, as a manufacturer, how do you demonstrate that your device is going to bring added value for the patients, for the practitioners? This appears in the clinical evaluation. Once all this is done, it is nicely packaged and delivered to a body called notified body, organisme notifié, on the slide. And the notified body is going to evaluate the conformity of the device compared to the regulatory framework. The notified body, they can work for many different manufacturers at the same time. It usually has a delegation from one government to operate as notified body, and it is also certified to work under a certain regulation environment. Currently, under the new regulation, the medical device regulation from 217-745, there have been a number of notified bodies which have been certified, but some weren't. So you need to know who you're going to be selecting. Let's assume that the notified body is very happy with your technical file, is very happy with your device, then you get the CE marking and your device hits the market, either via direct sales or either via distributors. Then starts the phase of material vigilance and post-market study. The manufacturer follows what happens once they put their devices out in the field. And it follows also any adversary event via the post-market surveillance. It's quite a long line, quite a long thing of elements that allows people like me to wear glasses or have insoles to correct my posture so I don't develop needless back or shoulder or cervical pains. But it's worth it, right? Coming back on the class, this is just an example to tell you that manufacturers are not alone. There are plenty of documentation for them to draw upon and to rely upon to determine properly what class there is. This is an example of the medical device consultation group who regularly issues guidances. And you have these very helpful schemas that you're going to say, okay, does my device touch only the skin? Yes, that's what it does. And only intact skin? Yes, that's what it does. So it's a class 1. And we're done. Believe me, for some customers of mine, it can take a lot of time to determine what the proper class is. You need to go out in the field to check what your challengers do, to check what the existing medical devices do. You need to check how you're going to be manufacturing also at times, which can be counterintuitive. And there's a lot of discussions between the manufacturer and the notified body for clarification. So here's a quick quiz, because I've spoken a lot. Which of those are medical devices? You know, for those who don't know. For those who know, this should be a field day. For those who don't know yet, well, play the game. Is a multifocal eye implant a medical device, or a hip prosthetic implant, an ambulance, a cardiac defibrillator, a pregnancy test, a bandage, hearing aids, a get well kiss, a magnetic resonance imaging scanner, latex gloves? So let me give you about 1 minute for you to try and remember the very lengthy definition. and to decide which is a medical device, which isn't a medical device. Okay. So all of those are medical devices. The hip implant is. Cardiac defibrillator is also. Pregnancy test, it is. Class 1. Bandage, hearing aids, MRI, or the multifocal eye. Latex gloves are personal protective equipment. And an ambulance is usually stacked full with medical devices and their accessories, and also health equipment, but it's not a medical device. And I'm sorry, but a get well kiss isn't either. So far we have an idea of the industry in Europe, in North America, and we have an idea of what medical devices are. We're going to move on to something called structured content. So structured content is what you and I are most used to. Okay? How it's done before. When in very olden days, when you needed information to last over a long time, well, you would choose very sturdy materials like a wall, stones. Unfortunately, it's not really movable, so something better came along, and that was parchment. This one is vellum from the 17th century. So it lasts a long time because we're in the 21st century and we still have access to this. It hasn't really degraded, the ink is still clear, and you can still very much see all the information on this. Better still, compared to a wall, you can actually give a parchment to another person and then share the knowledge. But you had to give the parchment, right? Because there was only one copy. Until other copies were made by hand. And until other copies were printed. So the beauty of this is that once you have your type set, all you have to do is ink your plate again, put your ink to the paper, and voila, you have another copy. So knowledge can be shared to more people at the same time. And it is harder to destroy plates than it is to destroy paper or vellum. Still, there is only so many books you could produce at the same time, or so many people you could lend one to. So what are the elements of what I call unstructured content, which is this? The first one is that, I'm going voluntarily back a bit. The first one is that when you want to learn something from unstructured content, this is roughly what you're going to get. You're going to get a snapshot. You're going to get a book on a subject. Doesn't mean there is everything to know on a subject, but it means there is a book on the subject. And what happens when you need to change something? Say, a new pharaoh comes along and says that every bird needs to have a tail from now on. How can you be sure that when you update your engravings to please the pharaoh, how can you be sure you're going to add a tail to each and every single bird that is present on this wall, or worse, inside this pyramid? How can you be sure you're doing all this coherently, completely? Okay. So the thing is that unstructured content cannot be reused because it is tied to a single presentation, the wall. It cannot be repurposed in other places when you need it. You need to copy it. So take another wall, engrave the same thing all over again, and hope you're not going to transform the feather that sits right in front of the three wiggly lines on the top lines into, say, a knife, for instance, so that you don't create differences. And every time you want to make a copy, you have to create and start from scratch all over again. That just means more work, more walls, and it's even more walls that you need to maintain. Then, as I pointed out, it's harder to stay consistent when you're using unstructured content. If you need to make an update, like add a tail to a bird, you need to find every instance and change it manually. So the intended use that is present in many chapters of the technical file, are you sure you're going to be able to update all of them before you submit it to your notified body? It's likely, it's very likely, there will be a few that will be missed. And the last is that unstructured content adds extra time to projects. Because this wall wasn't carved in one day or just by one team. There are many, many people who worked at the same time on the same wall. And it's only by looking at the whole wall, that we're going to be able to see if it makes sense or not. So imagine the notified body arrives in front of your wall and says, I see a bird without a tail here. Sorry, you're going to have to resubmit again. This doesn't work. That's unstructured content. And that's why some companies are taking too long to market their devices, and they're arriving second, third, or fourth. So what changed? Well, what changed is that there was a computer. Cool. Computer arrived. I did work on that one for the record. So computer actually splits the content from how it is presented. Just because the same content can be viewed on a screen, it can be printed on a printer, and it can be copied on the floppy disk or any portable hard drive that existed at the time. As you can see, content that is structured is primarily concerned with what the content is about, not how it is presented. If you have a look at the image, you have general categories: industry name, value proposition, promotion heading, examples of our work. This template applies to content or to medical devices, because all we have is industry name. It can be replaced rather painlessly by content or medical devices. So structured content is broken into its smallest reasonable pieces and explicitly organized and classified. Today, you don't really write documentation, you more like compile it. Why? Because when structured content is treated just like data, it can be assembled in endless way. So you can deliver what the notified bodies and health authorities need today, and you will be able to do so in the future, either for other devices or when the regulation changes. Structured content represents a paradigm shift from thinking about the presentation of a single document to thinking about the meaning of a piece of information that can be used anywhere. Take an example of the Lego bricks. They come in various colors, sizes, shapes, and they can connect differently. But a building brick, one just building brick, can be reused in many different creations, right? So that's unstructured content. Unstructured content gives you your absolute point of truth, which is your Lego brick, which can then be reused in various publications. It can be put into instructions for use. It can be put in production processes, SOPs. It can be put in marketing documentation. currently, the state-of-the-art thing is XML. On your left, something called DITA topics, Darwin Information Topic Architecture. It is a standard for creating information that is semantically aware and split. So these are your Lego pieces on your left, sorry, not lateralized, on your left. And from there, they can be pulled to build, to compile various documents. Same information, stored only once, validated only once, translated only once, many reuses. So, content done the right way. And because MadCap is hosting this software, this webinar, it's time to talk about their tools. Thibaut, do you want to chime in?
Yes.
Or shall I? Thank you.
I'll quickly jump in there. And as we'd already actually planned this, I'm going to add a little twist in there. We've got a new product in there. We've got an LCMS, and we acquired Xyleme. And so that's a learning content management system. So it does pretty much what a CCMS does, a component content management system, i.e. small reusable components of information, but this time for learning and training. But let me go over what we've got on here. Help authoring tools started quite a while ago. People got tired of using Microsoft Word for creating documentation, and some of the big players out there started with FrameMaker as an industry standard. However, that tool was really clunky, got taken over by many companies. And so companies like MadCap came along with an XML-based authoring tool, something that is lightweight, easy to use, doesn't require months and months of training to use, and with a UX that guides you through it. So you've got MadCap Flare, which is a desktop-based XML authoring tool. So yeah, it encourages reuse, XML being one of the best formats of content support that you can use for reuse. You're able to publish to whatever type of output you want. And then a few years later, we added MadCap Central, which adds online authoring, reviewing, and collaboration, and works in conjunction with Flare. A couple of years ago, we went full CCMS and acquired MadCap Ixia CCMS, which is a DITA XML structured content management system. And so with MadCap software, you basically got a choice of what technology you want, what price point you want to get into it, the complexity of your software, or of whatever it is that you need to document. You choose the right solution for you from this list, and of course with our new Xyleme product.
Thank you, Thibaut. So the point is that content done the right way obviously relies heavily on XML. Content doing not the right way is storing lengthy documents in captive formats such as Word, InDesign, even PowerPoint sometimes. Once the content is there, it's not going to go anywhere else unless you copy paste it. And that's when things can get really challenging, because when a piece of content goes into one document and then used in other documents and is translated in other languages, every adjustment creates a bit of friction in the process, and this gets multiplied for each document and each language. So to say an example from Sarah O'Keefe, 5 minutes of manually moving content from point A to B doesn't sound like much, until you have 3 different documents. For instance, your device master record, your design history files, and the device history record. So that would be 3 documents. And if you're selling to Europe, you need to have 27 different languages translated into. So that's 5 minutes, 3 times 27. That's hours gone, really. all this should be automated. So structured content is there. This is what allows you to, it's a secret ingredient that enables you to do more with less, and that's especially appealing for small-sized companies. Why is it appealing? We're going to move on into the regulatory framework. For those who are not familiar with regulations, there are a number of different terms that tend to complete and really complete each other and tile with each other and sometimes be slightly distant from each other. So you have the regulations in Europe, which are a binding legislative act. That is Europe saying, hi countries, this is how it's going to be, what's going to happen, period. Then you have directives. Directives, they set out a goal, and it is up to each country to draft their own laws on how to reach these goals. These are what we would call vertical standards. You know, they're vertical. They come from top to bottom. Through that, you have harmonized standards. So if you're using standards for your conception and development of medical devices, and it's hard to have my hands show this background, but for standards, you have the requirements. You have requirements that are put in these texts, and if you comply with these texts, then you are presumed to meet the general safety and performance requirements attached with them. So that's your layer, that's your base, and then you want to delve deeper into the directives and the regulations. And if you operate in the United States, or if you're aiming to market your devices there, then the FDA regularly issues guidances documents, and they represent the FDA's current thinking on the topic. So they're slightly different. Each country have their own habits. It's the beauty of it. So let's take the example of the European Union. First and foremost is the regulation 217-745 for the European Parliament. Then something we're going to be talking more about a bit later is the ISO 13485, which is a quality management system specific for medical devices manufacture. And the ISO 14971, risk management for medical devices. The EN 62366-1, that is the application of usability engineering to medical devices. And if your medical device has some power thingy, then, or not even, it could be inert, but it could be reacting to electromagnetic disturbances, then you have the 601-1 and CC61-1-2 about safety essential performance for electric equipment and electromagnetic disturbances. And then, of course, because they are devices, they are meant to be used either by patients or by practitioners, then there will be use of symbols. And symbols, we don't leave each manufacturer create their own. There's a list, there's a set list to reuse, and they have specific meaning and conditions of use for each item. And then the 2417 is the information to be provided by the manufacturer. And if you go into clinical investigation, the good clinical practices are detailed in 15.1555. And if your device is a software or uses software, then you're moving to the 62304. I stopped there because otherwise I would have run off the slide and I would probably put everybody back to sleep, even for those for whom it is morning. Just to say, there is a regulatory framework. They set the rules for the game you're set to play, which is deliver a medical device to improve health outcomes. So what's the point of all this? Really, it is all in all to demonstrate that manufacturers know what they do, how they do it, and why they do it. And it's also to show that health agencies certify some devices knowingly and based on criteria that are laid out. So regulations such as the MDR from 217-745, they are compulsory. Adherence to standards, they are voluntary. Now you may think that voluntary is like, yeah, we're gonna do this one and maybe this one and not this one. It's not really standard shopping. It is, this is my medical device. This is the class. These are the risks associated with it. This is how it is how it operates. These are the standards that are going to help me as a manufacturer set up my production process and be sure that I deliver the device that I have in mind in order to help the patients and the practitioners. So we're going to be talking about two texts, the ISO 13485 quality management system, which has an importance of validation of processes, and we're going to focus on two, content creation and language operations. And we're also going to be talking about the 14971, which is risk management. So the quality management system, you may have heard of it, or its twin sister, the ISO 9001. This one, the Q1 for medical devices, is specifically geared toward medical devices, compared the ISO 9001 is for everybody who wants to put up a quality management system. And it is based on plan, do, check, act. Over time, quality improves because we plan, we do, we check, it happens accordingly, and then we act accordingly. So the ISO really is a way for any organization to demonstrate its ability to deliver medical devices and services that meet the regulatory requirements. So these are the sections you will find in the norm, which can be purchased through your local regulatory provider. And it's important because this text allows you to determine the processes for quality management. Those which are required, those which are optional. But believe me, there's really enough to do with the ones that are required. And it brings together these processes all throughout the organization. It takes into account all the various roles, because a quality is applied at company or organization level. It's not just one person doing quality on their own, on their side. It is at company level. This text also suggests to use a risk-based approach, and from there, derive the appropriate processes for manufacturing and checking and all this. And it brings together sequence and interaction of each of these processes. They're really, if you take everything from a manufacturer that purchases raw material and then delivers finished medical devices, there's a ton of processes that go into that. Excuse me. So just to quote some interesting example, a process is a group of techniques aiming at obtaining a piece or product via transformation. And obviously, you may have many iterations of transformation to go from raw steel to an implant. And also, process validation is establishing objective criteria that a process consistently and coherently delivers a result or a product conform to pre-established specifications. All this is documented and is shown when a notified body conducts an audit for compliance, because the notified body must validate each and every production and service process. Translation are a service. Content creation is a service as well. It's also production. What are some examples of processes that deal with content creation and maintenance? Well, file storage and retrieval. Do you know where you store your files? What happens when your server burns down or is too old? How do you make sure only the right profiles have access to these files? Another one would be, how do you select your language service providers, also known as translation agencies and localization agencies? And based on which criteria do you decide to make business with them, these critical providers? And based on which criteria do you decide to keep them? What are the content workflow? Which function creates what information at what moment in what format? What flows out from a department and what flows into another? How do you keep track of change requests? How do you select CCML and XML authoring tools? All this is documented. There are processes. Let's move on to risk management. Risk management is throughout the life cycle of the device. every time a new action is introduced, the question is, what are the risks that this action introduces to patient, to production, to the integrity of our devices? Everything is risk-based. In order to meet that, there are a number of approaches. The first one is inherent safety by design. That is, you put a lot of energy into your design, into making your medical device safe. Or you can put protective measures in the medical device itself or in the manufacturing process. For instance, if you have a high-frequency scalpel, then you can put an alarm if it is activated, but it is not in the hand of the practitioner. And the last risk management is via information for safety. Either you deliver training to use your device or you provide documentation, usually both. But that's the last measure. So risk management, you're going to hear about risk analysis, risk evaluation, what is an acceptable risk, what is not an acceptable risk. How do you control the risk? How do you evaluate any residual risk that you haven't been able to lower? And what are your risk control measures? Are they up to scratch or up to notch, or are they not? All this you'll find in the slides a bit later. Remember that drawing? Well, if we go into the Annex 2, paragraph 6 of the MDR, getting a device on the market takes a lot of documentation because the documentation side contains the results and critical analysis of all verifications and validation tests undertaken to demonstrate the conformity of the device with the requirements and with the general safety and performance requirements. Every decision is documented. So what goes into a medical device technical file? The device master record. This one contains documents which describe how a medical device is produced, operated, and maintained. The design history file illustrates the complete development history of a product. And the device history record serves as an evidence that the medical device is produced according to the specifications in the device master record and that all safety and performance criteria is fulfilled. B3, only in conjunction, serve as evidence that the medical device is produced according to the specifications. And they make every step of a medical device and its development and production process comprehensible. You also have the MDCG guides, such as which class is my medical device. And then you have all the texts that we've seen or quoted before. If you're in the UA, if you're in the USA, then you're going to submit a 510K or a regulatory. And if you're in Canada, you're going to be talking about electronic common technical documentation. This is a quick summary of what goes. There's more than that. Obviously, there's a clinical evaluation. There are the summary of safety and clinical performance. There are plenty of documentation. And the freaking part of it is that all of this always mention which device we're talking about, what is the intended use, what are the instructions for use. So that's for the regulatory framework. Why do I think that regulations are a very asset for medical devices? The first one is that with structured content, there is only one single point of truth for each information. That means we can reuse it. That means we gain consistency and a faster time to market because we don't have to create everything from scratch every time. We can capitalize on what was validated and agreed upon before. And lastly, it's easier to update because there is only one place to update, not 10,000 birds on a stone wall. And because there is only one string of characters to translate once, well, that's going to save a lot of money in localization and translation. Because the content is separated from the layout, you can validate directly at the source level. You don't need to wait for the document to be compiled and sent to all the reviewers. You can say, hi guys, you are the reviewers. Is this the right name for our product? Yes, 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 yes. Everybody agreed? Good. this is valid, we can reuse it. And because the content is separated from layout, then you can dream whatever output formats you want. From one single source, you can generate a PDF for users to download. You can generate a bigger file for printers to print. You can generate HTML so that users can go and check some information online. You can embed your documentation inside your software for contextual use. Doesn't matter. And because content is also separated from layout, then you can set up workflows. So the approvers and the validators and the subject matter experts can be notified when it is time for them to chime in and to add their value. And because you have workflows, then you can automate publication. Once each and every Lego brick building a document has been approved, well, it can be published. And the last thing about structured content is that it is stored in a database. So you benefit from versioning and issue tracking. If there is any change, it should be attached to an issue or motivated. So that delivers on traceability. That delivers on traceability, meaning that in order to meet the quality management system requirements and the traceability with each and every piece of information that builds your product, as far as content is concerned, you're set. The beauty of unstructured content is that it allows for metadata. So that's an example, purely fictional. That's an asset. Her name is Lola. It's a picture. You have the descriptive metadata, structural metadata, and administrative metadata. So for a medical device, that could be, we have identified in a risk analysis risk number 11, we do not want this medical device to be reusable. And it is proven by a report. So in the instructions for use, it's going to be written, do not reuse medical device. And on the label, we're going to have this official symbol with the two cross saying there is only one use possible. You can also say what piece of information complies with the MDR. Annex 1, Chapter 1, Paragraph 1, which says that devices shall achieve the performance intended by the manufacturer. So for each and every Lego brick, you can actually add little labels to them saying what they comply with. So imagine a new version of the MDR will be issued or a new regulation comes along. You know what is going to be obsolete. So you can pull it from your database, assess the data, make it evolve if need be, and then revalidate it. So as a manufacturer, where are you? Are you carving walls or are you reusing Lego bricks for new creations? Point is that you are winning with structured content. One, copy-paste doesn't scale. So if you're a startup, you're not going to scale up unless you update your content processes and workflow. If you copy-paste, you're going to get information drift. Is it a feather or a knife? Not sure. Might be a problem later on. And roughly, investors don't trust copy-paste. If you're still at the level where you're carving walls, who would want to invest in this company? When you could be doing automation, fluid content creation and management, and be mature about your content, which, like code, is an asset to your company. Thank you for listening. If there are any questions, we're open now.
All right, excellent. Thank you very much, Solana. That was really interesting. I was engrossed all the way through. Looking at the questions, we've not had many come in, but one of the ones that was sent to me via another channel was, what's your advice for companies not using structured content? How difficult is the change for them to move over to structured content?
Well, like any change, you're going to have to make the case to put the money in this move from unstructured content to structured content. So the first thing is measure your waste. Where is the waste in content creation and updates. You know, because some of my customers earlier on, they were scrambling like mad to create content to meet MDRs, but they were still in very siloed supports. MDR is here to stay for a while, but there will be new regulations coming along. How are you going to surf that wave again? Is it going to be a cool wave you're going to be riding along, or is it going to be a tsunami that's going to send you, smash you to smithereens? So the first thing is track your waste. What is costing your company money in content creation? Are you sure all content is created? Do you know how this content is created? Do you know which functions create this content? Measure this. You can also measure how long it takes you to find a document written by somebody else in your organization. Measure that.
Yeah.
If you're spending 5 minutes a day and you have 10 documents to review every day, that's roughly an hour a day.
Adding up.
Right.
It starts adding up. That's
so find the waste, measure it, set your KPIs on this, and then you can go to your director and say, hi guy, we're actually losing 100,000 euro every 6 months by not moving to structured content. How about we investigate the possibilities?
all right. One interesting comment that was in here made by a Flare user, and she wrote a blog post for us, and she's had great success using MadCap Flare and using Flare concepts to tag specific requirements by number, which makes tracking and checking them very easy. I'd encourage everyone to pop onto the MadCap Software website and go into the blog post and look out for that one. It's a very interesting use case, and there are ways that you don't have to. It's not just structured. It's having something that has reuse built into it, and that way, if you've got reuse built into it, and you can have great approval workflows. I used to work in medical devices as well. Spent over 15 years technical writing for a medical device company, so I know that sort of pain. I know moving from an unstructured content creation software to DITA, and it was night and day. There was a lot more effort going on, but with the right processes in place, I think that there are parts of it that you can really ease, even when you're using an unstructured content authoring tool. I'll quickly go on to the next question. Do you have to consider a special change management effort at the regulatory department level to change the validation paradigm from validate document lately to an early validation of sentences?
Oh yes, yes. There will be education required. Most of the subject matter experts are used to, reading on a wall. So they have this wide altitude thing where they're going to take the document as a whole. Whereas this time, you're just going to them to say, this is the red Lego brick. I want you to tell me if it's the right red or not. So yes, it does take some education to do that. And it can start very informally by playing games at the coffee break, really. It can start very unofficially saying, hey, you know what, aren't you bored about reading the same document 10 times before every release? And we have to mark up what the changes are. But do you really read everything to make sure we're still coherent? We haven't broken something we haven't quite had the time to look into? So yes, I find it's mostly human-based, in that you're going to talk to them and say, by the way, we are trying to find ways to save time. How about we experiment on this? And if you experiment for long enough, it's going to become a habit.
Yeah, excellent. I've got another one on here, and it's, are there any best practices or tips and tricks for moving from unstructured Word to structured XML? How to plan for such a migration? And I'll just quickly butt in there before I let you answer. I did a webinar a few weeks ago, and you'll find it on the MadCap Software webinars page, and it was my journey from, basically I described my journey from frame maker to structured data in a CCMS. So I'd invite you to take a look through there. We've got a couple of blog posts on that as well, educational material. But this is a two-parter. This webinar is a two-parter. And in part two, I think we can include some some tips and tricks and that migration that can include some of the best practices there. Do you have any that you could just rattle off at the moment?
Yes, if you're using Word, I would suggest you compare documents between them and find
we've
what
lost your mic.
percentage.
There you go.
All right.
Okay.
Am I back?
Yes.
Okay, lovely. So yes, to answer the question, if you're working with Word documents or captive content, as I like to call it, I would suggest that you compare various documents and to see what percentage of content is in common. From my experience, when you're in unstructured content, it is worth moving to structured content, even having 20% of content recurring regularly. That's just my data, so don't take it for granted. It may be different in your case. So that's why I say, please measure how many times the same piece of content can be found in various documents. That's going to give you an idea of the very quick gains, which you may address by changing the structure of your document, if you can, or which may be gained by saying, hey, how about we experiment with structured content for a while just for this? Hope it helps.
All right, yeah. Next question on there. We've overrun, but I'll let you answer this last one. When you're editing large documents, thousands of pages, how do you determine where to focus your time and efforts when it may not be possible to focus on everything in the document?
Oh God, I can imagine thousands of pages. Yeah, I remember some technical files that when printing them, they were nearly my height. I'm 1.65 and they were nearly my height. I would say when you're reviewing something or editing something, either it's technical edition, so you want to be sure that one term is consistently used in the same way, or that one sentence is consistently used in the same way, that the intended use is exactly the same, that the references to the reports are always the same. That I would say this is one technical editing. If you're editing for meaning, that I would suggest you focus on who is the person, or for which audience are you editing this file, so that you keep your audience in mind, their information needs, what they're going to be looking for in this massive document, and make sure that these parts are perfect. And then next day you change, you find another audience, and then you review other parts. But you will have a same clearer focus to review each and every bit, hopefully.
All right. Thank you very much. I'm putting a couple of resources into the question panel. Basically the audience should see that and come up as one of the questions, but we'll be sure to add those to the email that we send out. I'll make sure that we add that on. Thank you very much, Solena. We're planning part 2, and we'll put that up and let everyone know as soon as we've got a date for that. Thank you very much for presenting today.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot. Bye.